Hey, Kurt, I want to start this episode by asking about your Oreo eating habits.
You mean the Oreo cookies that I love so much that I have to keep them in the basement?
Yes, those. Okay, so here's my question. If you love them so much, why do you keep them in the basement? Is it your office or is your bedroom down there? I mean, what else is in the basement?
No, the basement basically is just its storage. It's the laundry room, workbench with tools. Kids' drum sets are down there because, it's loud. Sauna in the shower. But no, it's not a place where I typically go to hang out. I keep the Oreos in the basement, Tim, as a way to make it more difficult for me to eat them.
Okay, so you don't live your daily life there.
No, not at all. I only go there when I want some Oreos or if I have to do laundry or take a sauna or need to haul up the Christmas ornaments around Thanksgiving time.
Okay, so you're increasing friction by keeping them there. So, or another way to say that is to reduce opportunity, right?
Exactly. You see, I love them so much that I would eat them all day long if I had if they were more accessible to me. So I store them in the basement to increase the friction between me and those heavenly discs of chocolate sweet fondant. That makes my taste buds do the happy dance.
Okay, get a room.
What? No, this is important, Tim. This is important. So you see, my office is on the second floor. So to get to the basement requires 2 flights of stairs. Time and effort to go down 2 flights to get the Oreos, then 2 flights back up to my office is enough friction for me to avoid eating Oreos at every moment of the day.
So would you call this like a habit or a routine?
No, it's not a habit or routine at all. It's an adjustment to my environment, or as you like to say, Tim, context.
And that's an important lesson in today's episode. Not every solution in behavioral science requires a nudge or a fresh start or a habit or a mindset or even willpower. Sometimes the best solution is just to change your environment.
Because context matters.
Absolutely.
Welcome to Behavior Grooves, the podcast that explores our human condition. I'm Kurt Nelson.
And I'm Tim Houlihan. In this episode, we had a wonderful conversation with Monica Reinagel. Monica is an authority in the field of nutrition, and we're going to talk about the role of context in your healthy habits and lifestyle. Monica is also a fellow podcaster.
And not of just one podcast, Tim, but of two podcasts.
Yep, she is making hay while the sun shines. Now, Monica started her first podcast called Nutrition Diva 15 years ago.
Whoa, that is forever in podcast years.
It really is. And it was recently named by the New York Times as one of the 12 health podcasts worth listening to. So we urge you to check it out.
Her second is the Change Academy podcast, which we were guests on recently. The Change Academy podcast is more focused on the art and science of behavior change. Monica is a terrific science communicator because she demystifies the complex concepts in scientific research and translates them into practical, actionable advice.
Yeah, she's also a very talented musician. In fact, her original career path was in classical music as an opera singer. Now, Monica is dedicated and hardworking, so she gave it her all, and we found this part of our conversation with her to be really interesting. It teed up the question of how do we find our groove when what we love isn't sustainable?
I was kind of, clawing my way, and it's a difficult profession. And I got to the point where I started thinking, I'm not sure if I really want to do this. And at the same time, like many professional musicians, I was working a whole bunch of other jobs, in between gigs and to kind of fill the gaps.
Okay, Kurt, back to Oreos with a little bit of trivia. Did you know that Mondelez, the company that produces your favorite sandwich cookies around the world, launched a limited edition Oreo in China with hot chicken wing flavor?
Okay, now that's something, as much as I love Oreos, I'm not sure that I would even try. Or maybe I'd try it once and then never, ever, ever again. All right. Okay. Back on track with Monica. We're big fans of habits and routines, as well as the fresh start technique for getting going with new habits. But Monica had some counter arguments that we think you should hear.
Because they deal with context.
Of course they do. And it's all about context. So we hope you'll enjoy the conversation with Monica. But before we begin, we want to ask you, yes, you who are listening intently on your headphones or on the stereo or wherever it is in the car, are you a grande latte drinker at Starbucks?
If you are, and just for those folks who are, we'd like to ask you to forego just one of your grande lattes each month and use those funds to subscribe to the Behavioral Group's Patreon page.
No, okay. I guess it doesn't have to be exactly at Starbucks. It could be at Dunkin' Donuts or Caribou Coffee or whatever other coffee chain. But if you are a grande latte drinker, or maybe we can expand it beyond lattes, Tim. Maybe it's like just large coffee as well. Could it be
Cafe Americano?
Chai latte. I don't know, but anyway. We digress. We've been doing this wonderful work, this podcast, for 7 years, and we have listeners in 140 countries, and we're nearing 1 million downloads. Tim, I can't believe that. Now, people, now is the time to jump on board and help us keep this wonderful experience going for more people.
Yeah. I have another favor to ask her.
Oh my gosh, you are just asking favors left and right.
Well, I would just be grateful to our listeners to share this episode with someone who's trying to get a handle on their health and fitness. Now, my guess is that you know one or two people in your life who are not totally content with their physical well-being, and you only need to share it with just two people. While this episode does talk about fitness, the show, as you know, talks often about change and helping people's lives better, make it change process easier. So please share. We would be very grateful.
All right. That was a nice ask, Tim. I'll give you that one. So
Thanks.
Listeners can also tell their friends about Monica's podcast. That would help people struggling through those same changes as well. And then lastly, listeners, did you know that we have started a Facebook page /group? And if you would like to join, that will be in the show notes. And for those people who like the show and would like to connect with other listeners and talk about some of the content we have here, not just with other listeners, but sometimes with us as well, we'll be out there and maybe we'll get a guest or two to show up. This is the place for you. So there is a link in the show notes. And if you'd like to share your thoughts and ideas with us and other groovers, that's the place to go.
Okay, that sounded like it was last, but actually I have one more last thing.
Oh my gosh. Thank yous and lasts and requests. My God, what are we going to do? Here we go.
This is the very last thing before we get to Monica. I'm hosting some conversations in the last 2 weeks of September of 2024. So starting on the 16th of September and running through October 1st, I'm going to be hosting conversations with you, the listeners. Yes, you.
Yes, Groovers, we want to hear from you. And we're calling this Tim's Groovy Listening Sessions. And they're an opportunity for you to groove with Tim on topics that are important to you. Of course, we want your feedback about the show, but the most important thing is that we want to hear from you. And there is a link in the episode notes to make an appointment. So you can make an appointment to have a one-on-one conversation with Tim. And all we want from you is that conversation. We want you to have the opportunity to talk with Tim and tell us what's important for you. And we just can't wait to hear from you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
With that, Groovers, we invite you to sit back and relax with an icy cold pour of your favorite healthy and fat-free water beverage and enjoy our conversation with Monica Reinagel.
Monica Reinagel, welcome to Behavioral Grooves.
I have been looking forward to this for quite a while. I've been a fan for a long time.
We have too, since we first met. We've been looking forward to this. We have to start with the speed round. So right up front, coffee or tea?
I have room for both of these in my life.
Wow. Your
Hot
Duolingo.
Coffee, I identify as bicaffeinated, yes.
So just to clarify, then tea is not always in a decaffeinated state for you. It's not like the alternative that you're going to use caffeinated tea.
Yeah. Yeah. So coffee in the morning. And if I want a little something to pick me up in the afternoon, then it's likely to be tea, hot or iced. Yeah.
Okay.
Fantastic. I love that. I love the bicaffeinated identifying. Okay. All right, Monica. Dinner with your favorite actor or your favorite musician?
I think probably with a favorite actor, only because we'd be less likely to get into shop talk, industry talk. I'm more curious about acting because it's something I don't know as much about. They're more of a mystery to me. So
I love that. And Tim will definitely be talking with you later about the inside industry talk, and I'll just sit back and kind of
make
just
the popcorn,
zone out. But yeah, make the popcorn and just watch, right? And be fascinated. But with that, do you have an actor or actress in mind that you'd be wanting to have you join in that could give you some insight?
I do love that generation of actresses who are now fabulously and fiercely in their 70s and 80s. So Judi Dench and Maggie Smith and even a little bit earlier than that, but Meryl Streep and those actresses. It's fun to watch them age with such grace and so feisty and still so relevant and still working and creating great things. So I enjoy that.
Yeah. So it's a totally different approach than saying someone who's like really reaching into the peak of their career, or Scarlett Johansson, comes to mind as sort of coming into, just this massive impact on the industry, with the breadth of work that she's got. You seem to be more interested in someone who's got more tenure.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Just the accumulated body of work is interesting. And I think just selfishly, as I'm looking for role models as I start to enter this, I don't know, third act, fourth act, or whatever of my life, I'm looking for examples of people who are doing it well and who are continuing to be creative and thoughtful and not try to compete with the younger generation, but to mentor them and to celebrate them, but still have something to contribute. So I'm sort of looking for an example to follow.
Yeah, I'm just amazed that Tim thinks Scarlett Johansson is like new and upcoming.
Well, and she's not.
It just Tim, I'm just leave it there. We just go there. There you go.
Monica, what kind of menu, if you were to have, let's say Meryl Streep or Maggie Smith or Judi Dench for dinner at your house, what kind of menu would you prepare for them?
We're in summertime right now. And so it's just hard to think of anything other than summertime fare. So I would probably be grilling salmon if I could get some local corn. Still a little too early for tomatoes here. But that kind of fresh, simply prepared, and anything eaten outdoors is always more delicious. So I'm envisioning serving them a casual kind of picnic supper on the back porch.
I'm so there.
You're invited.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Come on over. Because then
day.
There's no reason to get up from the table, right? It gets dark. You light candles, the fireflies come up, and the conversation goes on and on.
All right. I'm just imagining that now, and it sounds absolutely wonderfully.
You bring the grand dames, I'll bring the salmon.
Okay.
There you go. All right. I'm switching seasons. So now we're going to that time of year where it gets colder and it's New Year's. And there's a New Year's resolution. Is making a New Year's resolution for fitness a good idea or a bad idea, in your opinion?
I am not a big fan of this sort of clean slate. Like it's January 1st, it's Monday, and we can just erase everything that went before and get a fresh start. Although some people put a lot of stock in that. Gretchen Rubin, for example, thinks that that's a great strategy for building a new habit, that fresh start energy. And I can't deny there is that fresh start energy, but when it runs out, then, the plans are abandoned in early February, and then that's it until the next January. But where I've landed with this is let's leverage that fresh start energy. If you feel that drive, make that resolution, but let's not waste that early enthusiasm. Let's spend that time building other kinds of support and motivation and structure that will be there for you when that fresh start energy starts to peter out. So I've arrived at a little bit of a compromise with New Year's resolutions.
Okay. So context matters, right? This is the great behavioral science theme. Context, like the way that you do it. And I also hear you saying, you don't go to the extreme of, wiping the slate clean, but maybe there's some tweaks or more modest changes. Did I pick up on that correctly?
Absolutely. And also when we want to just kind of wipe the slate clean and flush our history, we're flushing a lot of useful information that we could be using to formulate a more successful attempt. So I think that rather than try to ignore everything that has gone before, pretend it didn't happen, because of course the impacts are still with us. You may flip the page on the calendar, but your body doesn't, right? Your brain doesn't. It's still all in there. So I just see it as a useful reservoir of experience and information that we could use if we are willing to include it in our viewfinder.
Are there some, let's stay with this for just a minute. I'm just curious about, are there some aspects of this parts of our brain that are sort of remaining when we have flipped the calendar, but our brain is not flipped, that we need to be aware of if we're going to make better decisions or make better New Year's resolutions, for instance?
Well, I guess what I think we need to remain aware of is that we are still the same person we were on December 31st, with all of the same inclinations, with the same things that we have learned, with the same biases and blind spots. And so those are the parts of our brain or our personality that I think we can stay in contact with, even as we are flipping the page on the calendar. Because again, I think that really helps us when we know ourselves and where we tend to fall off. I hate this phrase, but fall off the wagon.
Yeah.
There is no wagon. But, if we know what kinds of things are likely to get in our way and we can anticipate them and we can prepare for them and have contingency plans, that's really valuable. Pretending that we are suddenly someone who lives a completely different life and has a completely different set of habits just seems unrealistic to me.
It does, especially the way you frame it.
Framing is everything, right?
So on that, are you then kind of fan of the BJ Fogg, the James Clear, those micro changes, adding in a habit, stacking it on something that is already going on in order to drive that change? Or is it a larger picture than just those small incremental changes that need to happen?
Yes. So I am a fan of both BJ Fogg and James Clear's work, and I think that they've had an enormous impact on people's awareness and their ambitions, really, about how they might go about building healthier habits. So I think they've had a really positive impact. However, and this insight I really owe to Michelle Seeger, who I know has been on your podcast a couple of times. Yeah. She's been on the Change Academy a couple of times. We've done some collaborations together. And so I have to give her credit for this insight that habit is great, but it is not everything. Habits, formation techniques and strategies work really well with small, discrete, predictable sequences that we can influence in a reliable way. But because we are all now enamored, infatuated with this habit science, we run the risk of, just when you came on the Change Academy a couple of months ago, we talked a lot about tools, picking up the hammer, picking up the screwdriver. Yeah. We run the risk of trying to apply that tool to much more complex challenges that are not going to be as responsive to habits. And then we blame ourselves when it doesn't work. So I do a lot of work with, because of my training in nutrition, with nutrition and eating habits. Michelle, as you know, does a lot of work with physical activity and fitness. There's a lot of overlap between the two. Both of those are really complex challenges, which involve a lot of moving parts, which involve other people, which involve so many things beyond our control that it's unrealistic to think that we can simply create habit stacks that are going to solve those problems once and for all. So yes,
Yeah. And Monica, I will 100% follow up with you on saying I am in agreement of this idea that we have this innate kind of, oh, if I can just do this and change my habits, then the entire world will open up for me. And I think you bring up a really good point of this is that, hey, we think about eating. I mean, if you ask most people, it's a pretty easy thing. I eat 3 meals a day. I do all this. It should be a pretty standard process. But the fact of the matter is, that's not how it works at all. There's emotions that play. There's, as you said, people, social. You're in different elements, whether it's going out for a dinner party or just, you're at work and there's donuts in the break room and various different pieces. So there's a numerous amount of things so that this idea of, oh, I'm going to just be able to solve all of my issues through creating small incremental, not saying that they're not important and that they aren't part of that tool set, but they are a part of the tool set, not the be all. It's not a silver bullet to answer all of your needs.
Yeah. And I think the real skill, the insight there is recognizing what sorts of things would be well addressed with some habit formation techniques and which things are probably not good candidates for that as a first line approach. It's that discernment, like what would actually be the best way to approach this kind of a challenge.
So talk us through a situation or two. Where could you give us an example of where you've got enough control to say this is something that I can have a large amount of impact on, and then here's this area that I just don't really have that much impact on. Could you help delineate those two for us?
Well, one thing that comes up a lot in the people that I work with is just the difference between what we can do when we are in our own home in terms of planning and procuring and providing the foods that we want to have on hand, what we can do to hack our habitat. I know, Kurt, you said you keep the Oreos in the file cabinet in the basement so that they're not in the cupboard, in the kitchen. Yep. So we have a lot of control over that. And so many people can get to the point where they're eating pretty consistently at home. They get into a meal planning routine. They know what they want to buy at the store. They know how much prep they need. Works great. Then they are traveling for business, or they go on vacation with other people, or someone is unfortunately hospitalized. And so all of a sudden they're eating in a hospital cafeteria for 5 days, 6 days, 7 days in a row. And they feel completely unmoored. They no longer can have their structures in place that they've worked so hard to put into place and to create those habits. And they have to just deal with a completely different set of circumstances that they don't have a lot of control over. This can be really stressful.
Or experience with, right?
Or experience with.
Yeah, it's unfamiliar.
And I think where this trips people up is they feel like, well, it's just not going to be possible for me to succeed in this environment because I can't have all of these things that I've defined as my, prerequisites for success. And we have to, I think, in those sorts of situations, redefine success. And it becomes not a matter of, can I have my ideal meal, but what is the best of my available alternatives in this moment? What's the best choice I can make from what I've got here? How can I, for things that we can see coming, like business trips and vacations, we can think a little bit about, all right, I'm going to be in a hotel for 5 days. What could I maybe put into place? What a little advanced research goes a long way to figure out, is there actually like a Whole Foods or a Trader Joe's within a couple of blocks of the hotel? Or, what are the restaurant options? But it's being flat. I guess really what it boils down to is flexibility with how we're going to define success and what we are going to, what criteria we're going to use to decide what our best option is, so that we don't let perfect become the enemy of good.
That perfect enemy of good, I think, is always a piece of this. And for us right now, we have a whole series of questions. We haven't even asked the first one. So outside of the speed round questions,
I thought it was halfway done already.
No, we're going. We just the conversation has led us down this absolutely wonderful path that we decided to go down. But let me try to pull us back. And Monica, just for our listeners, can you Can you tell a little bit? I mean, Tim kind of alluded to it up in the beginning, but tell us a little bit about your story, the story arc, the journey that you took in order to come from like your beginnings to this behavioral science influenced person who's out there sharing wisdom with the world. Can you help us walk through that path, that journey?
It was a twisting path that this was not a journey that I charted for myself. But I wouldn't change it.
It kind of feels that way. And I think our listeners will get this when you start talking about it. Yeah.
So my listeners already know this. So my original career path was in classical music. I grew up in a house where that was what we did. I went to college to study voice and opera, and then went to graduate school, and then moved to Germany. And I spent, my 20s basically working full time as a professional singer. And there came a point in my early 30s where I started to consider whether this was really what I wanted to be doing for the rest of my life. And I'll be completely honest with you, had my career taken off and I was rocketing to the top of the profession, yeah, maybe I would have hung out. But I wasn't. I was kind of, clawing my way. And it's a difficult profession. I got to the point where I started thinking, I'm not sure if I really want to do this. And at the same time, like many professional musicians, I was working a whole bunch of other jobs, in between gigs and to kind of fill the gaps. And I got into publishing and writing, and I discovered that I enjoyed it, and specifically on the topics of health and food and nutrition. So I was kind of making a decent half-time living as a freelance writer, and that seemed to be an avenue that I could continue to pursue. And I was interested in health. When you're a singer, your body is your instrument. So every singer that I know is kind of an armchair nutritionist, trying to figure out whatever they can to keep their instrument in good shape. So I already had a little bit of background there. But the real turning point was deciding that I did not want to be kind of another self-taught, well-meaning, misinformed expert handing out nutrition advice on the web. I could see that was happening quite a bit. I could write well enough that I could get hired to do it, but I just didn't want to be that person. So I went.
So you didn't want to be a Tim, in other words.
Oh, come now. No,
who does?
I'm sorry. We know. Everybody knows I'm joking. Tim and I do this quite often. Sorry about that. I interrupted you.
No, not at all.
Joke.
So I went back to graduate school and retrained in the science of human nutrition so that I could do this from a place of authority, really, and credibility. So then I really was both feet in. But I never really saw myself working as a nutritionist, like in a clinical setting, seeing patients, doing that kind of thing. I always wanted to work in media and communications and writing. And I think that's just kind of the extension of the performing career, right?
Yeah.
And I got my break into podcasting early on. Before I'd ever listened to my first podcast, I was hired to be the host of the Nutrition Diva podcast. This was back in 2008. It was.
Oh my God!
Wow.
2008 was hired to host the Nutrition Diva podcast. And at the time, I thought, well, podcasting's cool, but this is obviously going to arc, and then we'll be on to the next thing. Probably 5 years max, and nobody will care about podcasts anymore. And that's not how that went. So that went on for a while, and I was podcasting about nutrition, and I was still working with people a little bit on the side. And what I realized is that most people who seek out nutrition counseling, nutrition information is not actually what they need. What they're really struggling with is to understand why they do the things they do, how to change their behavior, because what they're doing is not creating the results that they want. Really a completely different field, but one, as you both have discovered, that is infinitely fascinating. So I started to dig more into that just to be of service to the people that I was working with. Like, well, let me help you tackle this. Eventually launched a second podcast, the Change Academy, which you have been on, because I needed a place to talk about this. Why do we do the things we do? How do we understand our behavior? What drives our behavior? How can we influence it? And that led me here. So that's the Cliff Notes.
I love that. And by the way, we could spend an hour on each of those. As far as I'm concerned, the opera singer, the nutritionist, the podcaster, but we don't have 4 hours. So let's dig a little deeper into tell us a little bit about what makes Change Academy podcast important for you and important for your listeners.
Well, as I said, I was getting increasingly interested in these sorts of questions, and I wanted to talk about them more, but it was a little bit off topic for the Nutrition Diva podcast, because that one really does focus on questions about nutrition. When new studies come out, what do we need to understand about this study? It's sort of translational, translating research into practical applications for people. Also, just dealing with all the trends and the fads that are circulating about nutrition, trying to clear up some of the misunderstandings about that. The scope of that podcast really did not allow me to talk as much about this sort of human behavior.
Yeah.
And so the Change Academy was a place to explore that. Unlike the Nutrition Diva, which is part of a podcasting network, it's produced by Macmillan Publishing. So I have a wonderful partner at Macmillan, but it's, I'm partnering with them. It's a co-production. The Change Academy is self-produced, so I get to do whatever I want.
Whatever you want to do. Yes. Love that.
And I did. And I would never have had the courage to do that if I already didn't have 10, 12 years of podcasting under my belt. But I was like, I think I know enough about this to survive launching another podcast. And it's great. I mean, it's double the workload. I have to produce twice as many episodes, but because they're in these complementary but different realms, that workload feels lighter than it would to be producing twice as much in any one of those genres.
So this complementary fields piece of this. So can you help us understand and help our listeners kind of think through how does behavioral science fit into the nutrition and health kind of world that you're working on? And what can we learn from that? Or what are we missing? In other words, what are we missing when we think about nutrition without a behavioral science kind of focus? Does that make sense?
It does. And I think when we think about nutrition, we get really focused on what's the right foods for me to eat. What's the diet I should follow? Should it be a Mediterranean diet? Should it be paleo? We get really hung up on these questions. And that is really, unless you are dealing with a specific condition where you need to dial in your nutrition to a very specific and precise degree, those questions about the overall, diet, they're not as important. They're easily solved. There are a lot of ways to put together a healthy diet, and it distracts us from the questions we really need to understand. Like, what role does food play in my life, in my culture, in my family, in my emotional life?
Mm-hmm.
What are my preferences? What are the other constraints on me? What is driving some of my behaviors around food? Because it's not nutrition most of the time.
Well, but that sounds like a lot of work. I mean, it's a lot more difficult. It's easier to go to the paleo, search www.paleo.com and pull that and just like, boom, I'm just going to do that. But to actually start thinking about these things, it sounds like it's going to take more effort to be more intentional.
Well, if that first approach worked, then that's all we would need to do. But I guess people get to the point where they've tried that over and over and over again. It's not working. And the effort of figuring out some of these deeper questions and creating a little bit more of a holistic approach starts to feel worthwhile. And I will say, so I have a weight management program where people come in, and it's a group coaching program. There's a curriculum that you work through, and then you have a community, and I work with people. And people obviously come into that program because they feel like they want to lose weight, or they've lost weight, but they're afraid they're not going to be able to maintain it. And so they want some support with that. But what we find is that the skills and the approach translate to so many other aspects of our lives. And I think that's the other reason, Tim, that it's worth the effort.
Yeah.
To dig into those other questions, because once you start to get some traction there, you have the keys to the kingdom, because you can apply those same questions to relationships and professional issues and other kinds of behaviors that have nothing to do with nutrition, but do impact your quality of life, your self-esteem, your idea of yourself and who you are. So, I guess it's a little bit of a bait and switch, right?
Yeah.
In a good way, I hope.
In a good way. Yeah, that seems okay to me. I think that's all right.
Yeah, I think there's an aspect there that you talk about how it fits into your larger life and various different things. We've all had, or at least I have had, both myself, but also friends who you see go through this on a diet, lose a lot of weight, and then,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, a year goes past and they're back up to that original weight, and all that weight that they've lost, they have now put back on. And it doesn't instill this lifelong change, this, as you said, kind of fitting into the larger context of what we are doing as a person. And if you can learn those skills at, whether it be around nutrition or health or whatever else, they do apply across the board. And I think those are really great insights to take away, that we don't think about it that way. We think about it, if this is a diet, I am going to lose 20 pounds, and then that is, I have a goal, and then I'm done. But that's not how it
Then
works.
I'll be done doing that, and I will, and my life will begin, right? And, that is a really heartbreaking cycle. And clearly I've seen it over and over. And it's even more, I think what people don't realize is when you are working on weight loss, it's very visible. Like, especially if you're losing weight quickly. So everybody sees you doing it, and you get a lot of positive reinforcement, because in our culture, we think it's acceptable to comment on changes in people's weight. And we assume that when people are losing weight, this is a good thing and it's desirable and it's on purpose. And that's not always a safe assumption. But when you are losing weight, especially quickly, a lot of people will notice, and they'll give you a lot of positive reinforcement, and they'll congratulate you, and they'll be happy for you. And then that they see you gaining it back. But of course, now they're not going to say anything, but the internalized shame that attends that kind of, I think, for what people perceive as an extremely public failure, an extremely obvious. People don't see when you're paying down your debt, right? And they don't see when you're running up your credit cards. That remains private. But when we are tackling overweight or obesity, people do see it. And we have so much judgment attached to how successful people are managing their weight or maintaining their weight, that it really does add insult to injury. I think people that have gone through that cycle are literally traumatized by that, by the internalized and the externalized stigma. It makes it very hard to start again. I mean, my heart goes out to those people. And if I can play any role in offering them a place that is safe, that they can pursue this in a more sustainable way, then my life's mission is complete. But my personal approach to weight management also involves a much more incremental change, because we're going to be working on smaller changes. And so we're not going to get that big, obvious, dramatic thing that's going to attract all that unwanted attention. You can do it a little bit more stealthily.
I love that. You brought up the group coaching, and thank you for doing that. There's something else. There's another way that you can reach people, and that's through the Nutrition GPA app.
Oh,
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
This was my first sort of foray into behavioral science applied. And it grew out of another program that I had designed that was just like a quick hit. It was a 30-day kind of group challenge for people to work on their eating habits. So not weight loss, just like, how can I get a little bit more consistent with good enough eating habits? And I wanted a little thing to go with it, to gamify it a little bit and some way of tracking. And so a friend of mine actually, as a mitzvot, made me a quick and dirty little app that we could actually put out into the app stores.
Wow.
To support this program, when it was really just a pilot program. So I'm very grateful to Jeremy Jessup for doing that for me. So we got this little app out and we gave the program, and it really caught on. There was something about it that was just playful enough and unique enough and effective enough that was in 2015 that we did that the first time. So we're almost 10 years later. We're now in the fourth sort of iteration of that app. We've really grown up.
Oh, man.
Now the app is much more sophisticated than it used to be. We've had tens of thousands of people use it, but that has been such a, I'm sure you can hear in my voice, like what a joy that whole, well, not only, I mean, publishing an app is a whole thing, but I'm just so pleased that spark of an idea and that impulse, like it was kind of a like, hey, my dad's got a barn, let's put on a show. It's like, wait, I can make you a little app, that little impulse and step that we took so imperfectly, right? That first app, so imperfect. I mean, the core of the app remains unchanged even 10 years later, but the manifestation of it was pretty down and dirty. I'm so happy that we did that, because now we have something that I'm really proud of and really excited about. But I guess we're talking about it, and I should probably just give like the 15-second description of what it is. This is an alternative to the kinds of diet tracking that people do where they log every single thing they eat so that they know when they get to their calorie limit. I don't love that approach. And I think there's a lot. That's a different
What is there
episode.
not to love about trying to keep track of every single thing that you put in your mouth? I mean, doesn't everybody love that?
Some people really do find it necessary. Anyway, I wanted an alternative for that. And so this little app, once a day, you answer 10 questions, yes or no questions about what you ate that day. So it's pretty easy. And then you get a little letter grade for your day, just to give you a quick read on how you did that day. But more importantly, and this is the behavioral science aspect of this, it averages your daily grades over time, and you start to build a nutrition GPA, grade point average. And the idea here is that it's really not your worst day or your best day that determine your outcome, although those are the days we remember.
Yeah.
They weigh so heavily in our self-estimation, but it's not actually your best day or your worst day. It's your typical day, your typical habits that actually determine your outcome. And so this is a way to get a beat on that. What is actually typical? And then the other thing that's really important to me about this app is that nobody's expected to get an A. I mean, you can get an A on individual days, but the goal is to carry a nutrition GPA in the B range.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, this is evidence that you're being consistent enough with enough of the good habits to actually be getting the benefits of them. And you're not overdoing all of the vices so often that they're really undermining your health. So there is room for the hot fudge sundae, the 2 glasses of wine night, all of that, the French fries, but not every day and not all of them, so.
You brought up at the very beginning of this that initial kind of 30-day thing was about good enough eating. And I love that kind of component. And what you just described is, all right, is there a problem in trying to have that perfect diet every day? And I'm assuming that, for some people it may not be, but for the vast majority of us, and it seems like the Nutrition GPA app is saying, look, you can get an A here and there, but we're not expecting you to keep that up every day, because that's hard. It goes back to Tim talking about that hard, part of this. Is that what you're saying?
Well, let me understand your question. If someone were getting an A every day, would that be a problem for their health? No, especially if they weren't suffering or their family weren't suffering as a result. But I think what you're asking is the ambition to get an A every day, is there any downside to that? Is that the question?
Yes, that is the question.
I think the only danger there is that when we get a B or a C or an F, I've had F days. And when that happens, we throw in the towel. We're like, well, I I blew it. I broke my streak. I had a good streak going there. Then I broke it, and we turn our attention in another direction. So that's, I think, the primary danger of attempting to uphold too high a level is that when we fall even a little bit below that expectation, we just give up entirely.
Yeah, that's no fun. That's not a good place to be. Yeah.
What the hell effect?
The what the
right?
hell
There
effect,
you go.
yes.
It's hard to restart,
Yeah. Monica, you know that we like to talk about music, and we often ask our guests about the desert island question. What artist or what two artists would you bring with you? But when thinking about your background, when you're in the world of more serious music or classical music, as a lot of people refer to it, the artist and the composer are two totally different things, right? So I wanted to ask you from this perspective, from the perspective of what two artists would you bring with you, but also what two composers might you want to bring with you? And is that a fair question for you?
Can I just tell you which two condiments I want to bring with me?
Okay.
That one's so much easier for me. Lemon, pepper, and sriracha. But
okay.
Oh my God.
That's great. Okay. And by the way, this is not a take it to your grave question. This is just,
I can answer it
Friday.
Differently tomorrow.
Absolutely. It's just a lovely Friday in June, and we're just having a conversation. And how does Monica feel right now about
Okay. That takes a little of the pressure off. Thank you. I appreciate that. You make a really interesting distinction there between the creator of the music and the interpreter of the music. I'm glad you mentioned that. And of course, so I was on the interpretive side, and you're right, for pop musicians, or what do we call them? They're just as serious as anybody else. My nephew is actually an artist, sort of more in the rap and hip hop area. And I'm so aware of the different relationship, the creators and the interpreters. There's no line between them, and it's so collaborative. There's so many artists will be involved in the creation of any one thing. It's a whole different thing. But that is a really interesting distinction. So there are composers that I love to sing, that I love their music, that I love the roles that they wrote for me. Mm-hmm. I don't know
in
if
opera specifically.
In opera, or actually even in oratorio.
Okay.
So I really love to sing some of the masterworks of Bach. I don't know if I'd want to be on a desert island with him. He seems a little severe. I don't think he'd be much fun. I'm not sure if he'd have good survival skills. I don't, even though I speak German, I don't know what we would talk about.
But he changed the course of modern music.
It's cliched to say, but I mean, he really did. And yet, I don't think I'd want to take him on a desert. Maybe I'll take some recordings, but not him. Mozart, on the other hand, he looked like a good time guy. Resourceful, right? I feel like he might be a better asset on a desert island. And then there are composers that are just interesting people. Like, for example, Charles Ives is a contemporary American composer. Well, not contemporary, 20th century, who made his living as an insurance salesman.
Yeah,
and I think it would be kind of interesting, to hang out with somebody who does what I do, which is blending two kind of different professions, and how he felt about that. So those are some thoughts on composers. In terms of artists,
the performers, the interpreters, as you said. Yeah,
the interpreters. Okay, for opera fans listening, I know this is a controversial answer, but because it's kind of like your team coffee, team tea question, but I do love Renee Fleming. I so enjoy her performances, and I just think she's such a smart, intelligent singer, and she moves me, and I think she would be fun to be with.
And what could be controversial? And forgive me, I am totally unaware of a controversy regarding Renee Fleming.
Well, no, not in any, really only in the do you know that phenomenon when somebody, that phenomenon when somebody is so good and so successful that other people start to feel like, then it's too obvious to like that person. It's a little bit of that. She's just amazing.
Yeah.
And the other one that's on my mind right now, because I just finished, Daisy Godwin wrote a fictional biography of Maria Callas. I don't know if you saw it. It's called Diva. It came out in January.
I haven't seen it. No.
Macmillan published it and they sent me a copy as a little holiday gift. And I really enjoyed it. Now, Maria Callas is a singer who's sort of fetishized by a lot of parts of the musical community. I've never really been, a
huge fan.
Well, you just neither here nor there, whatever. She's a soprano. We don't sing any of the same roles. But after reading this biography, which I can highly recommend, it's just a great read. It's fascinating. Now I find myself thinking, she's such a fascinating figure. I think I might invite her to my desert island as well.
Oh, it sounds like a fun desert island to be in.
Yeah, who do we have? So we got Renee Fleming, Maria Callas, Mozart, and Charles Ives. That sounds like, and the three of us, I think it's a dinner party.
Well, and I think it's always interesting that when we talk about this, there is oftentimes this desire for novelty and diversity. That, picking two composers that would be the same or picking two vocalists that have a very, very similar approach, you're kind of looking for different, in some ways, it sounds like you're looking for different personalities.
I'm taking the desert island part of the question pretty seriously. These are people I'm going to have to be spending a lot of time with, right?
Yeah.
Thus, no Bach. There you go.
Sorry. JS, Johann. But we'll definitely take the collected works with us to listen to.
Oh, gosh, yes. Holy smokes. Yes. Brandon, I'm going to start with Brandenburg Concerti. But anyway, it'll take me a while to get over to the vocal works. But at any rate, Monica, thank you so much for being a guest on Behavioral Grooves today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I enjoyed our conversation so much, and I'm just chuffed to think that I will be on your podcast because I've enjoyed so many of your episodes.
Welcome to our grooving session where Tim and I share ideas on what we learned from our discussion with Monica, have a free-flowing conversation, and groove on whatever else comes into our basement Oreo brains.
Oh, yeah. There it is. It's the Oreo thing, isn't it?
It's the context, right? It is the ability to say, what is going to actually change my behavior? Mm-hmm. Is it putting more willpower on this? Is it setting up routines and habits? Is it whatever else we could do? Or is it understanding that I can just move things around in my environment? I can set up my environment to make the easy things easy and the hard things hard, right?
That's it. Right. That's it. It's not, because not everybody is going to have a 2-story house with a basement. So, so not everybody can actually just move something so it's farther away in their house. But you can do things. You can certainly make accommodations to just add friction for things that you want to do less of, and to reduce friction for the things that you want to do more of.
Yeah. So I said easy things easy and hard things hard. What I meant was good things easy and bad things hard.
Yeah.
See, even me, I don't get it all the time. I need to set my environment up better so that I can talk better, right? Is that how this works?
If only. Okay, on to the grooving session. Kurt, what did you take away from our conversation with Monica?
Well, I think this idea about nutrition, and it needs a new frame. It's not about which diet will work or choosing the best exercise routine. It's looking at the system as a whole. And actually, I think Monica says it great. So let's listen to how she states it.
There are a lot of ways to put together a healthy diet, and it distracts us from the questions we really need to understand. Like, what role does food play in my life, in my culture, in my family, in my emotional life? What are my preferences? What are the other constraints on me? What is driving some of my behaviors around food?
So this idea, right? There's a lot of ways to put together a healthy diet. There's a lot of ways to do that. There's not one right way. And for you, that way might be different than for me. And that's what I loved about this conversation, because too often I think we get hung up on this idea that I have to find the right way to do this. Or if I only pick the right diet, then I will be eating healthier and having a healthier lifestyle, when in fact, you have to understand, how does food play into your life, into your culture, family, all of those things.
Yeah. Well, and Monica gets to this whole idea that so many diets are about not doing something, about giving something up. And that's always loss. And losses loom larger than gains in our mind. So, of course, it's going to be harder for lots and lots of things. Whereas, getting back to your Oreo example, just by changing the context in which you eat, I think is a really important, really healthy way of thinking about, okay, you still like Oreos,
Yeah.
you still eat Oreos, but you know that there's a cost in time and effort to go and get an Oreo.
Well, and partly it's not even the time and cost. It is the fact that they're not where I typically go to look for my food. And so they're not a temptation to me. So it's taking the temptation 100% away.
Yeah.
And that is an important aspect of it. So it's not even a loss then, because it never even crossed my mind that those Oreos are there in the everyday normal going down to my cupboard looking for food because I'm hungry, and I haven't necessarily formed a desire or craving for Oreos. I just know I'm hungry. But if the Oreos were in front of me, that craving would have happened, and then I would have had to use willpower to change it, as opposed to now I can eat an apple or do something more healthy.
Because that's the good things making it easy, right? Because the apple is in the place where you're going to go look for food on a regular basis, right?
Yeah.
I just want to give a little shout out to Ari Kuglansky. He was a guest of ours in episode 372 in September of 2023. And now he was using this as a metaphor. I just want to be clear that we were talking about striving for significance and how people change their lives. But I thought it was pretty cool that even just as a metaphor, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he did say that there's many ways to satisfy hunger. And it just got me thinking about Monica. And it's like you can take snack food out of the cupboard, you can make a meal, you can order in, you can go to a restaurant. There's a whole bunch of different ways to eat to satisfy your hunger. But the question is, how we decide is dependent on a lot of systematic things in our lives. It's all contextual. And if we set up our lives to make it easy to eat healthy food, to eat healthier, then that's going to satisfy our hunger and give us a generally better way of living. I guess that's the short story. That's what I take away from it.
Well, and that leads into, I think, the next thing that I want to talk about from this conversation is this idea of a nutrition GPA, right? So this idea of not having a specific element, but a GPA, the grade point average across many different areas. So snacks and meals that we made, or going to the restaurant and getting it all together. And I love this idea of wanting to take care of your body and the nutrition and everything that goes into it. But this idea that we often think that we have to do everything right, 100%, that we have to be straight A students, when in fact, we don't. We just have to shoot for a B average.
That's right. That's right. And a B average is attainable for most of us if we're kind of thinking about occasionally getting an A and occasionally we're going to get a C.
Yeah.
But if we get a lot of B's in our food choices, that's not a horrible thing, actually.
Right.
It also reminded me of David Dunning recently said something. Now he's the creator of the Dunning-Kruger effect, which is which has to do with sort of on a scale. What Dunning and Kruger found is that people who are not skilled tend to overestimate their skills, and people who are really skilled tend to predictably, accurately assess their skill level in things. And David Dunning said, you need to be a good chess player in order to determine if you're really a good chess player. Like you have to be skilled in order to understand how skilled you are. And if we're going to become good at nutrition, then we have to actually develop some skills around it. It's
Yes.
worth putting some time and energy into understanding the skills that you need to eat healthy so that you can actually make an assessment of I'm getting a B. Because
Yes.
if you're consistently getting D's and F's, you're actually not in a good position to decide if you're on a B, if you're getting a B GPA.
Well, and what's really interesting about that metaphor, we got some good metaphors here, but this idea of playing chess, I've played chess since I was like a kid, and I play quite frequently on chess.com. And I can tell you that by just playing chess, I don't necessarily get that much better at it. I have to work at it. I have to actually go and study the games that I played. I have to look at the people that I'm playing against. It is not just the amount of time I'm spending playing. It is the effort and purpose and elements that are around being intentional about playing chess that make me improve and become a good chess player. The thing I love about chess is like really good chess players, they make a move and then another move, and pretty soon, there's still a whole bunch of chess to play, and one will resign because they're playing 15 moves ahead and seeing, yep, I've lost this game already. Whereas I'd be sitting there going, what the hell is going on, man?
Right.
You got all these pieces still on the board, but they understand that they have put themselves into a position where they cannot win. That's how good they are. Yeah.
Yeah. And they can tell that they're not going to win. And this is part of the trouble with someone who is not skilled, me for a lot of my life in nutrition.
Yeah.
That I didn't know if I was doing it right or wrong.
Well, it goes back to the things of how much is one Oreo in the overall nutrition, thing for my day, right? Is one okay? Is two okay? Is three okay? Is four okay? How many Oreos can I eat? I hate going back to this Oreo thing, but, or the nuts and different pieces, are those really good for me nutritionally? Are they not good for me? And how does that fit into the larger scale? And sometimes they might be, and sometimes they may not be. So it's understanding all of those pieces and how they fit together, just like looking at a chessboard and seeing all of the pieces on the chessboard and going, oh, I have this or I don't.
Yeah, I think that's a really great comment, Kurt. It is another great metaphor. And the important thing to take away from this is build your skills. And Monica even went so far as to say that weight is a public thing, so we tend to care about it more. For instance, more than credit card spending, because credit card debt's a private thing. And so let's actually learn more about it. Let's become skilled. Let's understand what that one Oreo means to you in your life. What does one Oreo a day mean, or 10 Oreos a day, or however many a day you're going to do?
Wow, 10 Oreos a day. I would, that would not
Sugar
be a
high.
good thing for me. Okay. One last piece, and this goes into what we were just talking about with chess as well. But we talked with Monica, not necessarily about nutrition, but about deciding when to quit and to move on. And it's kind of that aspect of the good chess player knowing sooner that this game is done and I need to move on to the next game. And I think there's a skill set in that is larger than nutrition and various different things. It's about our lives. At what point do we decide to quit?
This gets back to conversations that we've had with Andy Duke. I remember having a conversation with Jeff Madoff about this, about at some point, life could get just difficult enough where we say, okay, I'm done with this. I'm going to move on. Richard Thaler has even said, oftentimes a lot of our decisions aren't really choices because by the time we make them, there really is no choice.
Right.
But I think that what Monica suggested to us is that she did make a choice. She was active in making a choice. She decided to give up her singing career. If there was some financial hardship, but it wasn't impossible. She was still making some kind of a living, but just not enough. And she didn't want to do that. And I think that that's a really important thing to go, okay, I have a choice here. I can do something different. And it was inspiring to me.
I'll go back to this chess analogy. She understood enough about where she was in her singing career and what a singing career entailed and all of the facets that went into it, that she saw the board clearly before she was in checkmate.
Yeah.
And she was able to then adjust and make that adjustment easier because she wasn't in checkmate. And all of a sudden the game's over. And now what do I do? That I think is really important.
And kind of getting back to Ari Kuglansky's approach to saying there's a lot of different ways of satisfying your hunger, that for Monica, she could see podcasting and media as an extension of performing.
Yes.
Like she kind of saw this arc, which I think is so beautiful, right? That okay, it's a gig economy. I can do that. I know how to do a gig economy. So she plowed through that.
Okay, man, we could go on and on and on, but we got pages and pages of notes on this conversation with Monica, but I think we need to wrap it up. What do you say?
Agreed. Let's close out with just a couple of reminders. First, our Patreon site has some wonderful levels that you can choose from. Just pick one that corresponds to the cost of your grande latte or your super chai latte or your Americano grande cafe. I don't know. I don't even drink coffee. What am I saying? But you only have to give up one and just keep the rest of them for yourself. Enjoy it, but just share one of them with us. That's what we're asking.
Yeah. And second, Tim will be hosting Tim's groovy listening sessions. I like saying it that way. Starting on the 16th of September and running through October 1st of 2024. Please sign up. Talk with Tim. He's starving for conversation. He's lonely out there. He only gets to talk to me a couple times a week. And then otherwise he sits around and twiddles his thumbs, and he wants to talk with you. So go click on the link in the show notes, sign up, find 30 minutes to talk with Tim, and have a great conversation.
Lastly, please share this episode with a friend who's having trouble managing their nutritional value of their food. And of course, check out Monica's Change Academy podcast or Nutrition Diva. Both of those are great podcasts.
Yeah. And with that, we hope you take some of Monica's great ideas and put them to use this week as you go out and find your groove.